don't know if you can hear me, but that's the cavity where the watch parts will end up going. That's why it's recessed. Not talking much because it's hard to talk over the machinery and concentrate. Basic shape. Now comes the fun part. It's like watching paint dry. I'm going to start putting the watch parts in. Basically, I have tons of little gears ready, and I will start bending, shaping, can imagine. It's just like building your own puzzle. Now my watch parts pins are all done with CA glue, otherwise known as super glue. And I glue each gear in place, and then eventually, once I've got pieces and parts in place, I'll fill it all with CA glue. That's an activator to instantly set the glue. And you'll probably see me over the course of this, if you're going to watch all this, kind of gets old and boring, I'm sure. If you're going to watch all this, you're probably going to see me drop about 100 of these before it's done with. At first, it's very simple because I'm just dropping them in and gluing them. But eventually, I got to start searching and finding ones that fit into the little holes and everything. Right now, all I'm trying to do is get them attached. Save that one, do something different. Like that. I honestly probably won't let this go for the full length of this watch parts thing because I can't see how this would be interesting for very long. Just let you basically see how I start the process and start laying it out. And I'll bore myself to death with actually completing it. It's not boring though. It's just tedious and time consuming. Seeing if the arc isn't exactly right, that's what happens. So I have to readjust this arc. Didn't notice it when I laid it down. And really, I'm assuming, that there's probably some pinsmiths on here watching. You can do this with anything. Just find something small and minute, inlay it into the pin. Done it with nibs. I've done it with nibs. Inlaid nibs into one. Done it with feathers. All kinds of different stuff. But you have to be patient. That's for sure. It's not a quick going process. It's not super exciting. done with this, gluing them all in place, what I'll do is I'll fill all that cavity with CA glue, super glue, and then I will file it off by hand, somewhat smooth, and go through and drill out any air pockets that are there and refill those with super glue and repeat it until there's absolutely no air pockets. And then finish the entire pin in the CA glue, which I typically don't do, but it's just because I'm already doing all the CA glue on this pin to start with. There's no sense in mixing all the materials, which CA is fine. I just prefer lacquer. The only bummer to CA, as far as I'm concerned, which isn't necessarily a bummer, is it's not UV protectant, which the lacquer I use is. So, for example, if you use Purple Heart on a pin, over time Purple Heart will turn brown as it's exposed to sunlight. So, by using a lacquer with UV properties, that's going to extend the amount of time, UV protecting properties, it's going to extend the amount of time that for example, Purple Heart will stay purple, the Duke will stay orange, etc. Lots of woods react to the sun. Now I got a couple in place. What I'll do is I'll show you how I would fill it in. Basically, up here where there's a few parts. This is a medium viscosity, so it's thicker than normal super glue, CA glue. And I just slowly start filling it in. And then hit it with the activator and continue. And I build it up to match the profile of the rest of the pin, which takes quite a bit. So I can see the screen now. Is this boring to everybody? I would assume it is. Slide this in underneath. If you're just joining, we're at the boring part now. You missed the turning part. Maybe I'll do this again. Maybe not next time. I just had to get this watch pin done. It's overdue. But maybe sometime with something that's not so tedious and detailed as this. Maybe some, I don't know, it would be good if, I'll do a batch of mini mags soon. They're quick. I can complete them on camera and it won't be as long and tedious as this. I've been meaning to do some anyway. It's been a while since I've done a batch. Try to leave, when I do these, I try to leave little spots in between where I can come back later and put tiny, tiny little parts in. I got little screws, itty bitty springs, all kinds of stuff. something else here in a second. Give me a second. I'll show you my favorite part, which is the color change once you apply a finish. As you can see, this pen looks pretty boring. However, as soon as you apply a wood sealer or your finish, it's going to change dramatically. And I'll just do it real quick now to let you see. I'll have to sand some of it back off, which is no big deal, but at least you're not just watching watch parts. Second. Watch color change. And this white will be dirty. The holly on this will be very dirty when I stop it because I didn't do it properly. But now you can see the grain details and such. This is Amboina burl. In it once you apply the finish, and that's, I always normally leave that as kind of a surprise for myself because I really truly don't know exactly what it's going to look like until it's done. So I'll turn the pen and then apply a sealer just so when I stop it I see the surprise and not the bare boring wood. Of course, the 3D effect of that wood will only increase as you increase the layers of finish. So it will get prettier and prettier the more layers you put on it. Because what it does is why burls look so crazy, or flame maple or whatever, the grain goes in different directions. And by that grain going in different direction, it reflects the light differently. The light reflections is what makes it look 3D, even though it's a two-dimensional object. It's just the fact that as you move it, the light's reflecting off of those grain patterns at different points, so it makes it look like it's moving three-dimensional. Something I always sneak into each and every single watch parts is a watch hand. Every one you see, I will have a watch hand somewhere. It's primarily gears, but always one watch hand. Good thing with like medium viscosity CA, you have a moment to move it around. It doesn't dry as quick as thin. Now I'll get a couple small parts and show you how that works. Basically any spots where I have voids. For example, there's a tiny one right there. I don't know how much detail this camera's picking up. My phone camera's picking up over the internet. But I'll start filling it with little things. This is I believe it's a counterweight off of a watch. Or a flywheel. I don't know. That one already shaped at some point. As you can see, now you know why these are on the upper end of my price range. This is a time-consuming process, and we're in the very beginning, because in pin turning, once you've got down how to turn, that goes very quickly. The time is involved in finishing. Finishing takes so much time. If this was a single wood pen, I would turn this in probably 5 minutes or so. but then finishing would take nearly an hour by itself for a very basic finish on a simple pin. When you have segmented parts such as these, you gotta, like for example, you can see, I can see, I don't know if you can see, like in the holly, there's dust from this rosewood. So it's not just sand, throw finish on it. It's sand intelligently, keep all the dust out of the light colored woods. It's more to it than just throwing paint on it. And if you don't know what I'm talking about by the dust bleeding, our website, I just put a straight holder on there, which I discounted a lot because it got a bunch of dust in the holly and made the holly look very brown and splotchy. And because it wasn't a custom order, and I'm behind on custom orders right now, so I just put it on the website discounted, which I normally don't do. I normally donate it, but I'm just so behind, I'm scrambling. So, and I'll do another fill in case someone just joined us. This is how you fill all the gears. Once the gears are glued in place, I take this medium CA glue, fill in all the little spots, and then once that's done, add a little activator, that'll harden it into place. And the cool thing about this is when you're filling is like when you add another layer, it will actually work if you push on it just a little bit and melt the layer underneath. So if you get an air bubble, you can work out that air bubble that way. And something else I learned is that the reason I'm making this pin, which this is, I'm trying to think, I think this is my first ever return on a pin because of an issue with the pin of itself. I'm thinking, don't hold me to that, but no, it doesn't happen very often. But anyway, I learned that you cannot do this on humid days. Water is what activates the glue, and the humidity, or water is one of the things that will activate the glue. High humidity will cause cloudiness and air bubbles, which I was not aware of because I just perchance had never made one on a very humid day, and the customer got it and it was completely different than when I shipped it. So I'm making this over again for them, and that's why this needed to get done, and why I'm doing this, the most boring pin I could have done for Periscope. Excuse me. I'm looking at the screen now. Does anybody have any questions? I'm able to look over and see it. Can you have that, Gordon? I'm actually, the return pin, I'm actually going to be donating. What I do is I have someone that teaches. I'm not going to say where, who, what, when, whatever. And they teach quite a bit. And they teach in areas where not everybody can afford a fancy pen. So I donate them to that person, and they put hands, all my little boo-boos, which isn't as much as it used to be, unfortunately for them, but all my boo-boos normally go to them, and then someone that normally couldn't afford a pen, custom made, gets one at no charge. So I just save them up, and when I have a few, I send them. Now the fun part starts, where I start looking for itty bitty pieces that fit exactly where I need them. questions other than Gordon trying to get a pin out of me? Lathe speed? And hi, David. My lathe speed, I run full tilt. There's ups and downs to that. I would say run slower, maybe like at 2000 when you're starting to rough and learning. But you're learning rather fast, so you may be beyond that. I don't know. But I run full tilt, so like 3600 RPM all the time. It's more a matter of touch than anything. If you learn your touch and how hard to dig that chisel into the wood, that makes up for more than the speed itself. The reason I run it at a high speed is the higher speed gives you the smoothest finish with a gouge. You want to try and do most work with a gouge because it will create the smoothest finish possible. Skews work great, but learn to use a gouge right and it will always be smoother than a skew. You'll see me do a skew when I'm doing a thin tail. Once I get down to about 1/8 of an inch in diameter or so, about like this size right here, because this is going to go thinner, I will start using a skew and actually scraping it a little bit. Old time wood turners will tell you that's wrong, learn to use a gouge, but they also aren't dealing with the small diameter that we are. It's just not possible because what will happen is, let me see if I can show you. I'm not going to move that. Pretend this is your rest. And I'm sure you've had this happen. When you get down to thin, it's going to dig underneath of it and then scrape and bend it. What you're going to have to do to combat that is build up your fingers, because if I don't know if you saw me when I was turning this, but I hold on to this tightly the whole time, and the heat builds up, but I've also built up calluses so the heat doesn't affect me like it once did. Okay, cool. But then you notice that I was pretty much holding the wood the whole time, and that's keeping it not only from moving up, but also from moving out. So I'm holding it like this because my thumb is keeping it from pushing up, and my index finger is keeping it from pushing out as I'm turning these thin things, because once you get down to a small diameter, it's just not possible to just push the gouge against it and go. Yeah, it gets pretty hot. You got to build up to that. Something you can do, let me finish gluing this in place. I'll show you what I've got. It's something that carvers typically use, but it's what I built myself up with. It's called finger cots. It's leather, and then stretchy fabric on the back. And you can do that and hold on to it. The bummer with these is you got to watch. Most of them are stapled. Don't do it when you're finishing because the staples can grind into it. But when you're, and they make them for your thumbs too, and it'll protect your fingers, and it's not something that's going to get wound up in the lathe itself. Thanks. Just blaming on all these good tips because I did it all wrong at first. Good God, the mistakes along the way. It was exciting then because it was like, as far as I knew, nobody making pins at the time. At the time, I didn't know about Bill Lilly when I started. Didn't know about Michael Soul. So I was winging this all on my own. That's true. No better way. all the things that we do, all the mistakes we make in our life that makes us who we are, not the things we do right. Alright, do a little bit more fill in here. As you can see, this is slow going. It's not thrilling. I'm trying to keep an eye on the screen. It's the first time I've ever even turned Periscope on today, so I'm a little bit clueless. Other than it said broadcast, go! Just doing the boring part now. I'm trying to think of other things. Like I said, you can inlay anything. Anything you can think of. I had a box of used principalities once, and they were junk, so don't freak out here. I took them and cut a cavity and then laid them into a pin. Feathers. All kinds of stuff. I'm trying to think. Rhinestones I did once, but it looked like I'd bedazzle the pin holder, so I think I gave it to gave it away or something. Kind of ridiculous looking. Maybe I just did it wrong. Let's see. Try and scatter the colors. No. And since I see people coming and going, I'll kind of explain what I'm doing again. I'm taking watch parts and bending them to match the arc of the pin and inlaying them into a little recess I did in this pin holder. It's about like watching grass grow or paint dry. But turns out cool when it's done. Let's see, another tip. I was talking about holly, taking in rosewood dust. Something you can do when you're finishing is, if you've sprayed your finish and everything, I leave everything on the lathe until I'm done with it. So I wet sand on the lathe and everything. So I take this off, spray it with lacquer. In this case, I'll be coating with CA glue. But if I get dust like that, and it's after I've finished, what I'll do is I'll take my parting tool, and I'll actually part just the holly down until that dust is gone. And then I will fill that back up with paint or clear coat. It's time consuming with lacquer, but it keeps you from having a pin that's done with dots of dust in it, especially when you're trying to create these ultra white lines. Part that down so it's clear, clean again, sand it, and then fill it with clear coat. And not as easy if you use just a standard lacquer, but my lacquer is a two-part, so it actually has a hardener and it stays in place a little bit easier. Another thing you could do is fill it with CA and then re-lacquer on top of it. I personally don't mix it if I can avoid it, but it's absolutely fine. CA and lacquer will work together. I know people that use CA glue as a wood sealer, which works, and then lacquer on top of it. this up. See, once all these little gears are done, then I'm going to come back and there's going to be all kinds of itty bitty bitty gaps that I'm going to fill. I'll drill. I'll do one here in a second to show you how ridiculous this gets at times. Glue this in place. What I will do is I will find a screw, for example, like that. I know you can't see it because it's not going to focus in. And what I will do is if I've got an itty bitty gap, got a little Dremel here, I will, with a tiny, it's got a number 65 drill bit in it. There's one. There's a hole right here. I will drill a small hole. Blow the dust out. And then drop the screw. Good God. Let me find another screw. There's one. And that keeps me from having to cut the screw off or anything. I drop it into that hole. And I filled that itty bitty gap in between those gears with an interesting part instead of, there you go. So I see people are fading fast and I don't blame them, so I'm going to continue gluing parts. Now that I got a basic setup for this, maybe I'll do it more often with something more exciting than gluing watch parts is in place, because that's what most of this is. So watch soon. I'll announce it. I think you get notifications if you follow me on this thing. I don't know. I haven't learned the ins and outs of Periscope yet, but it's cool sharing. Thanks everybody for coming. I'm going to finish out my afternoon by finishing out a ton of these little parts. All right, take it easy, y'all.